May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is a case about a street gang that took hold in a group of neighborhoods in Newport News, Virginia. The name of the gang was called Thug Relations, or TR. Thug Relations took over these neighborhoods through violence, intimidation, and fear, and then used locations in those neighborhoods to sell drugs, mainly crack cocaine, powder cocaine, and marijuana. The defendants, Eric Pridgeon, also known as Rabbit, or Rab, Herbert Pridgeon, down at the end, also known as Bach, and Maurice McLean, known as Mo, were all members or associates of Thug Relations. Thug Relations started out as a rap group, but it quickly became a criminal enterprise. The original members of Thug Relations could, and that is Herbert Pridgeon, known as Bach, and other members known as Mustafa Muhammad, whose name is Moody, Robbie Bowles, who is also known as Rob, and a guy named Corey Henry, known as Seco. You will hear testimony that this group recorded songs and performed at clubs like a rap group. They also engaged in criminal activities. They did home invasion robberies for their manager and their benefactor, Kevin Holland. He was their main supplier in the mid-2000s. He would get drugs from outside the state of Virginia and then give them or sell them to the Thug Relations members so he could sell them in Thug Relations territory. Now, Kevin Holland was eventually arrested and convicted of federal narcotics conspiracy, but the drug sales continued even after he was gone. They just turned to a different man to supply their drugs. You will also hear testimony that the Thug Relations territory centered around the Denbigh section of Newport News, Virginia, and included 3 housing complexes: the Aqueduct Apartments, which is also referred to as the Duck, Warwick Townhomes, and Warwick Lawns, among other neighborhoods. Many TR members and associates were from one of these 3 neighborhoods. And the Thug Relations territory was often affectionately referred to as from the Duck to the Lawns, and in fact, the Thug Relations rap group actually named their first rap album From the Duck to the Lawns. Now, within its territory, TR established dominance over the drug trade, the drug sales. Outsiders were not welcome in that territory. Only people that were known and trusted by the Thug Relations members were allowed to sell drugs within the territory. And as I mentioned, they mainly sold crack cocaine, powder cocaine, and marijuana. In particular, Thug Relations liked to sell in certain areas of the Aqueduct Apartments. You will hear about the area throughout the trial. It was referred to as the Cut. Now, the Cut had its advantages because it gave people selling drugs in that area the ability to see a lot of the surrounding areas of the Aqueduct Apartments. So if the cops were coming, they could see and run and hide. If a rival drug dealer or threat was coming, they could see that too. The Thug Relations gang was ready, willing, and able to protect their drug territory through any means necessary, and that included violence, shooting, and robberies. Violence was a key part of the life in the Thug Relations territory. The evidence will show that TR members would boast to each other about the crimes they had committed. They bragged about robberies. Sometimes they referred to these as licks, and they bragged about people they had shot, even bragged about people they had murdered. Violent acts would earn respect from other TR members and associates, but the violence also served other purposes. The violence first intimidated rival gang members. You will hear that TR had 2 main rival gangs in Newport News. The first was Courthouse Green, which later became known as the Black Pea Stones. The second rival gang was a gang known as the Dump Squad, which was predominantly flourishing in downtown Newport News. TR's violence also served to intimidate rival drug dealers. If someone that was not a TR member was caught selling drugs in TR territory, that person could be threatened. They could be beaten, sometimes shot, or maybe even killed. In fact, you'll hear examples of this kind of retaliatory violence throughout this trial. On July 5, 2007, the defendant, Maurice McLean, and 2 other TR members shot and killed a 17-year-old boy because he was selling crack in Thug Relations territory. On January 10, 2008, McLean and several other TR associates robbed a drug dealer named Rob, and his mother was shot during that robbery. These are just examples of the type of violence that TR would engage in to protect their drug trafficking. TR's violence also served the purpose of intimidating the witnesses who saw their crimes and it prevented these witnesses from coming forward and talking to law enforcement and telling them what they knew. Because one of the most important rules in TR territory was no snitching. Snitching, you will hear, could have serious and sometimes deadly consequences. Now, you will hear testimony in this case that the witnesses were initially reluctant to come forward and talk to law enforcement, especially about what they knew about the defendant's crimes. And in some of these cases, they lied to law enforcement. They denied knowing anything when in fact they had seen something. When in fact they did know facts about the crimes. They lied because they were worried about their own safety. They were in fear and they felt intimidated. Many of these witnesses feared being labeled a snitch. In fact, the defendant, Eric Pridgeon, he himself feared the snitch label. The evidence will show that on March 16, 2010, Eric Pridgeon murdered Dominique Wharton because Wharton had spread rumors that he was snitching. Eric Pridgeon couldn't stand for that, couldn't be labeled a snitch in his neighborhood. So what did he do? He taught Wharton a lesson. He shot him in the head and killed him. So as you can see, the evidence is going to show that these witnesses had a right to be in fear of the Thug Relations enterprise. Each of these defendants, they sold drugs in Thug Relations territory. Each of these defendants, they engaged in the violent acts of Thug Relations to further Thug Relations goals. They murdered people. They robbed people at gunpoint. They shot people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Thug Relations gang, this enterprise, is important to the case because although you're going to hear a lot of evidence about each of these defendants participating in murders and shootings and home invasion robberies, Count 1 of the indictment doesn't charge them with any of those things. Not those crimes. Count 1 charges each of the defendants of participating in a racketeering conspiracy, also known as RICO. Now, racketeering conspiracy, you'll hear, is also a criminal enterprise, which is simply a group of people that come together and they associate with each other for the purpose of engaging in a course of conduct. The group commits crimes in order to further their common purposes, and these crimes are what is referred to as racketeering activity. Members work together for numerous common purposes. Those common purposes included protecting TR territory, sharing information, and updating each other about TR activities, keeping rival drug dealers and rival gang members in fear of the Thug Relations enterprise. They would retaliate against rival drug dealers in order to protect their drug territory and their drug business. They also intimidated witnesses. Now, a criminal enterprise doesn't have to be a formal organization, doesn't have to be a business, or a group with a few bosses at the top who call all the shots, like maybe you have heard about with the mob. Thug Relations was not a structured group. This didn't have ranking members. The members weren't jumped in to formally join. They didn't have organized meetings. But a criminal enterprise can include informal groups like TR so long as the activities affect interstate commerce. In this case, the evidence will show that Thug Relations sold drugs, including cocaine, and the cocaine came from drug suppliers outside of Virginia. Now, throughout the course of this trial, you're going to hear testimony from some of the defendants' co-conspirators. These people have pled guilty to their crimes. Some of them have pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy themselves, and these cooperating witnesses have plea agreements with the United States, and they have the hope that if they testify, then perhaps their sentences will be reduced at some later point in time. Some of these witnesses are able to provide direct eyewitness accounts of the defendants' crimes, and they can do that because they were there. They were their friends. They were their chosen associates, so they know exactly what these guys were up to. Now, many of these cooperating witnesses, as I've mentioned, had committed crimes themselves. They've done some bad things, and you may not like them, but they do offer a unique perspective about what crimes the defendants were up to. And we anticipate that the court will instruct you to view their testimony with caution, which you should do. But the United States is not just asking that you rely on cooperative testimony alone. We will be presenting corroborating evidence throughout this trial. That evidence includes evidence that was collected at crime scenes, forensic firearms evidence, and eyewitness testimony from other witnesses in the community. Now, as far as racketeering acts go, Count 1 of the indictment charges the defendants with committing or agreeing that another TR member did commit racketeering activity that falls into one of the three general categories: murder, attempted murder, and robbery. The evidence will show that all three defendants were members and associates of the Thug Relations enterprise. The evidence is also going to show that all three defendants engaged in murders, engaged in robberies, and they engaged in shootings to further the goals of thug relations. Now, counts 6, 7, and 16 also charge it's a different type of charge that you may have heard called violent crimes in aid of racketeering. It's referred to as VICAR. And the violent crimes in this particular case that were committed in aid of racketeering are murders. The first three crimes you are going to hear evidence about in this trial are the murders of three individuals: Lafayette Bailey, Lloyd Robinson, and Dominique Wharton. Lafayette Bailey was a drug dealer. He sold mainly marijuana and ecstasy. But he was more than that. He had a family. He was a loving partner, a loving father to 2 children. And he and his family became victims of the thug relations enterprise because Eric and Herbert Pridgeon, along with 2 other TR associates, believed that he would be a good robbery target. So on December 15, 2009, the 4 men drove into Mr. Bailey's neighborhood in the Warwick Mobile Homes trailer park where he lived with his girlfriend and their 1-year-old daughter and their young son. In the early morning hours, the defendants attacked. The evidence is going to show that Eric Pridgeon kicked in the front door to the Bailey's trailer. All 4 of the men burst into the home. Eric and his brother Herbert went into the master bedroom in the back of the home where the Baileys were sleeping, while their associates looked around the house for things to steal. They testify about what happened to her and her family. She was suddenly awoken by 2 masked men carrying guns. They burst into the room. One of the men pointed a gun to the back of her head. The men then ordered the Baileys to get on the ground and started demanding to know where the drugs were. Things got violent pretty quickly. They started hitting Mr. Bailey in the head. Then Herbert Pridgeon, Bach, sitting at the end there, he walked over into an adjoining bedroom and picked up the Bailey's 1-year-old daughter and brought her back into their bedroom. Both of the Pridgeons threatened the baby and kept demanding that her parents tell them where the drugs were. At this point, Mr. Bailey had enough, and the evidence will show that he got to his feet and tried to fight back. And when he did fight back, what did these defendants do? They shot him multiple times and fled the home, leaving to watch him die. In December of 2009, right after this murder happened, both of the Pridgeon brothers were at a Thug Relations rap performance in Virginia Beach, and at that performance, they bragged to other TR members and associates about shooting a drug dealer that lived in a trailer park. The evidence will show that that drug dealer was Lafayette Bailey. Now, the second murder that you're going to hear about is the murder of a man named Lloyd Robinson. Just a few weeks after the murder of Mr. Bailey, Eric and Herbert Pridgeon were on the hunt again, looking for more drugs and more things to steal. The evidence is going to show that on January 8, 2010, both Pridgeon brothers, along with Thug Relations members Kevin Ashby, Douglas Ashby, and Mustafa Muhammad, committed yet another home invasion robbery that resulted in another person's death. And during that robbery, Eric Pridgeon shot Lloyd Robinson in the back of the head. Now, the actual target of this robbery was not Mr. Robinson. The target was a man by the name of Jeffrey Torres. He lived near Mary Immaculate Hospital in Newport News. Mr. Torres, like Mr. Bailey, he didn't live alone. He lived with his girlfriend, and he actually had allowed 2 friends of his to stay with them at their home, Tristan Scott and Lloyd Robinson, who they all affectionately referred to as Skip. Now, Mr. Robinson also sold drugs, mainly marijuana. The evidence will show that a few days before the Thug Relations crew executed the robbery, the Pridgeon brothers did surveillance on Mr. Torres' home in preparation for the robbery. Then on January 8th of 2010, the Pridgeon brothers and their crew returned to the location. TR member Kevin Ashby was driving. He drove the entire group that night. They were in a gold Chevy Caprice, and all of the men except Kevin Ashby were armed with guns. We will present forensic evidence to you that will show that Eric Pridgeon was, in fact, armed with the same gun that he had used to kill Lafayette Bailey just weeks earlier. And when they arrived, Eric kicked in the apartment door, and the men entered the home. Will testify. She's Mr. Torres' girlfriend who lived with him. She woke up to a commotion in the hallway, and then 2 masked gunmen appeared in her bedroom. The men ordered both of them, her and Mr. Torres, to get down on the ground. One pointed a gun at his head, while the other was demanding to know where the drugs and the money were. They threatened Mr. Torres' life. They threatened Mr. life if Mr. Torres did not tell them where the drugs and the money were. Now, Tristan Scott, who was also one of the guests in the home that night. He's going to testify as well. Now he, Mr. Torres, and their friend Skip, that's Lloyd Robinson. Before the robbery, they had been up pretty late. They were enjoying a game of Monopoly, drinking some beers, smoking some cigarettes, smoking some marijuana. The group had just turned in. Mr. Scott had gone into his room to go to sleep when he heard somebody kick in the door. And the next thing he knew, intruders were trying to come into his room. One of the intruders pointed a gun at Mr. Scott and ordered him down on the ground, and they placed blankets and cushions over him. And another robber came in and was demanding that Mr. Scott tell them, where are the drugs and the money? Mr. Scott could also hear these defendants doing the same thing with Lloyd Robinson, and Lloyd Robinson was staying on the couch in the living room. Mr. Scott could hear that Skip, Lloyd Robinson, was kind of going through the same thing. They were demanding to know, where are the drugs, where's the money? Now eventually, as the robbers were leaving, Mr. Scott heard a loud pop. There's a gunshot. And then he, Mr. Torres, and went out to the front room to see if Skip was okay. They found that he had been shot and was lying face down on the couch. They called 911. They tried to perform resuscitation on Skip with the help of the 911 operator. Unfortunately, Skip died then and there before the paramedics could even arrive. The testimony and evidence in this case is going to show that during the robbery, Eric Pridgeon was standing over Lloyd Robinson's head, holding a gun to the back of his head, while he had Lloyd Robinson on the couch. And eventually, after the crew had finished searching the home and had stolen what they wanted, Kevin Ashby, one of the co-conspirators, went back inside to tell Eric, "Hey, come on, let's go." Eric Pridgeon still had the gun pointed at the back of Mr. Robinson's head at that time. Mr. Robinson was still alive, and when Kevin Ashby urged him to leave, you will hear testimony that Eric Pridgeon turned to look at him, snickered, and pulled the trigger. As soon as the group heard the gunshot, the entire crew ran back to the car and drove off. And while they were in the car, the group learned that Eric had killed Lloyd Robinson, and some of the guys in the car started yelling at him. Eric Pridgeon responded with words to the effect of, "This is what I do. I kill."